Welcome, critters. I am Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, as we examine and discuss the Critical Role episodes through the lens of sacred reading practices. We look at the plot lines, we look at the characters, we look at the episodes, and discuss them. So this particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 3, Part 2. And today is Alyssa joining me. So what other fandoms are you a part of? Like, which other fandoms do you follow in the pop cultural nerdy world?
These days, not many. I tend to do one fandom at a time and just get really into it. So, I went through the typical Doctor Who and Supernatural and, all of the early 2000s fandoms one at a time.
Yeah, I think I got to season 5 with Supernatural before I lost my motivation.
I don't think I made it much farther. I don't remember. That was a long time ago, and I try not to.
Yeah, once the plot lines get like really stretchy, then I'm like, all right, guys. That's how I felt with Once Upon a Time too. Like once they started bringing in like all of these really random characters and like forcing their plot lines to intersect, I was like, all right, guys.
Yeah. Once you start like actively trying to make your show longer and not hiding it, it's time to be done.
Yeah. Like go the Freaks and Geeks route. It was short and sweet and packs a punch. Firefly, those one season blockbusters that become cult classics.
Yeah. Or, the ones that actually stick with their timeline, like, oh, we planned for 5 seasons, we're done at 5 seasons, whether we have a huge following or not. Love those. Always turn out better.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many to choose from too. Oh man. All right. Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And always, we love hearing from you guys as well, your own insights and stories. So please comment, like, and subscribe below. Ready? All right, let's dive in. So, as we open this podcast episode, Vox Machina have just come upon a makeshift Duergar war camp at the edge of a large cavern that is teeming with Duergar, massive trolls and ogres, and one floating tentacled leader who Scanlan just witnessed sucking the brains out of a captured dwarf miner. Lovely. Tiberius identifies this mysterious creature as a mind flayer, or illithid, as Keyleth's people calls them, and they discuss how to best proceed. Grog, which is more likely Travis as the strategist, hatches a plan to create a distraction where they bait a bunch of Duergar to chase them across the bridge that is spanning the cavern and hopefully plummet them to their death. Tiberius offers to use some illusions to act as a distraction, while Keyleth offers to create a hallucinatory terrain at the edge of the cavern to fool the Duergar into thinking the ground extends out further than it actually does. Tiberius and Vax plan to be on the Duergar side of the bridge while everyone else waits on the opposite side, ready to cut the rope bridge once the Duergar start crossing. Tiberius casts Fly on himself. Then Vax yells into the war camp and Tiberius throws out 3 random illusions: an undead lich, a veteran human warrior, and an exact duplicate of Tiberius himself. It draws out about 16 Duergar as well as 2 trolls and an ogre, and they start rushing toward the illusions that are placed on the edge of Keyleth's hallucinatory terrain. Vax makes a hasted break for the bridge while the Duergar throw some javelins at him, and both trolls and ogres go falling through the hallucinatory terrain over the edge of the cavern, as well as about 4 Duergar. The rest of them stop suspiciously as Tiberius's illusions try to draw the rest of them over the bridge, but instead they actually have a brain, and a few of the Duergar generals start hacking away at the ropes of the bridge on their side to bring it down. Percy takes this chance to shoot his long-range bad news gun at them, but the bridge is cut clean and Vax starts plummeting as he tries to pull out the flying carpet to catch himself. But simultaneously, the Mind Flayer imposes on Vax's brain, causing him to fall off the flying carpet. So Tiberius flies toward him, grabs him, and before he falls too far, but they lose the flying carpet in the process. Luckily, Tiberius and Vax make it back to the rest of the group as Percy continues to shoot at the Mind Flayer. Vex looks for another bridge or way to get across and spies the flying carpet caught up in the remains of the rope bridge. So Tiberius flies down to retrieve the carpet and notices that the bottom of the cavern is actually mostly water. Keyleth, Percy, and Tiberius take the carpet down to the bottom of the cavern to scope it out more, and they see a body of water, 3 streams of lava, and a couple waterfalls and tunnels leading further beneath the ground. Keyleth uses some of the water to cool some of the lava and forces it into the tunnel containing the lava to try and see where the tunnels go, which is mostly unsuccessful because there is lava blocking everything. As this happens, they notice that the ogres and trolls that fell off the cliff are actually treading water in this big body of water, but they are suddenly sucked underneath the surface by some unknown force creature. So Keyleth, Percy, and Tiberius head back up to the rest of the group to discuss their options. Vex and Keyleth, against the wishes of the group, decide to go back to the bottom of the cavern to look for tracks coming in and out of the tunnels, hoping to discover clues that Chemo was actually passing through there. Behind one of the waterfalls, they find a hidden tunnel carved into the wall of the cavern. Tiberius flies down to them and takes the flying carpet from them, for some reason, dick move, before carrying it back to the rest of the group. Vex and Keyleth head into this hidden tunnel stealthily before they discover that it doesn't really go far and ends within 25 feet. But they do discover a pile of bones and rags and a humanoid form curled up in the pile of rags. Woken up by their conversation, they see another Mind Flayer emerge from this pile of rags, filthy, desperate, and afraid. It speaks to them telepathically and asks who they are before forming a magical barrier between them. Keyleth says that they're friends, and Druid crafts a flower before laying it at the edge of the barrier. And the Mind Flayer asks what their purpose is here, and they beseech his aid and partnership as Keyleth so eloquently says, "Let's not die together." Vex promises them revenge. I was thinking, is it a them or a he? Do we know at this point what his pronoun is?
He's referred to as a he. Okay. Pretty much from the start.
Okay, when I was taking my notes, I was like, I'm not sure. Vex promises him revenge against the brethren who did this to him and successfully persuades him into an allyship. Tiberius returns the carpet and ladies take him back up to the top of the cavern to meet the rest of the group. He introduces himself as Clarota. So Grog asks him about the metal hat that is on his head, and he tells the rest of them, that he was cursed with the mark of the arcane, cast out, discarded, and left to die by the rest of the hive. So the hive is apparently sick, which is apparently his community of mind flayers, and the lead mind that keeps them safe has been taken hostage by an alien being. Clarota was able to escape its mental grasp with the help of his metal hat, but the rest of the hive is now under the control of this foreign creature. Clarota wants their alliance to defeat the foreigner and free the hive in the hopes that they will accept him back into the hive as a hero, possibly. So Scalen sings him a healing song to help heal some of his wounds, and Clarota ends the episode with, "And now we talk about how we kill Kavarn," who, if you remember from the last episode, is the god that the Duergar are beholden to, and who is also creating the stitched together monstrosities that have been plaguing the mines up until this point. So it was a lot happening in a short amount of time during this last half. There was a lot of action. So what do we think about what happened?
I have a lot of thoughts about them ending up with Clarota.
Yeah.
Because, and this is something I was thinking about last time we talked, because it starts in the first half of the episode, where every time they run into a mind flayer, they're like, we have to be super careful. We have to be super suspicious. We can't, let down our guards. And then as soon as they actually meet Clarota, they let it all go. Like, they offer him revenge before they actually find out that he's been kicked out. And it's a fascinating response to me, especially from Vex. She just watched one of these things hurt her brother, which for Vex is
that's a no-no.
That's a good way to die.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she's befriending this thing, and it might be from her perspective because they don't have backup, but she doesn't stop Keyleth either. So I don't know. I find it very interesting given everything else in the episode, because up until that last 25-30 minutes,
it's the last 20 minutes, I think.
It's a huge switch from everything else they've said, and it's kind of crazy.
It was so chaotic. This whole episode was just so chaotic. Like, there were false starts, there were overlapping plans and motives, and there were like so many arguments going on. Like, all of the discussions around planning, like everyone was talking over each other. Like, it was so chaotic leading up into this point. And then once Vex and Keyleth are left on their own, like, this is such a surprising outcome.
And I loved the line that Matt ended with the episode. He says, "You acquired for the moment a very curious ally," which for Matt to comment on somebody that they decide to bring along after the episode ends, that's really fascinating. I think even he was a little blown away by the direction the episode went.
Yeah, and it really speaks to all of the Easter eggs that he hides in the environments that they explore that oftentimes they never find. Like, the fact that they found Clarota in the first place was like determination on the part of Vex and Keyleth.
And a little bit of not caring, they just went for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what kind of allegorical metaphors or stories are we seeing here?
I think I got distracted by Clarota.
Yeah. I mean, you can continue on Clarota's.
No, that was pretty much the entirety of my rant on Clarota, but at least for now. But I find him fascinating. Allegories. I think that the biggest thing that we saw this episode was that at some point you just have to choose one way or the other. You're not going to have all of the information. You're not going to find out what's eating the trolls, or, that there is something at the end of the tunnel, but you have to make a choice anyway. And for our lovely group of, 7 people right now, that's a lot of people to try to get on the same page. And at some point you just have to move. And I think Travis in particular at one point just said, just do something.
He's always the one to hit the big red button.
Yes. Yeah. But you're never going to have all the information, but you have to make a choice at some point.
Yeah. And I think Clarota makes that decision too, like being faced with these 2 strange women who stumble upon his cave. Like, he actually decides to join their side quite quickly.
Yeah. And I think that that's super interesting for a lot of reasons, but in particular because they offer him a lot. Everything that's coming out of this partnership is coming from them. He's not asking for any of it. He's taking what they're giving.
Yeah, I was so super surprised when Vex first offered revenge. Like, I don't know where she grabbed that from beyond like reading his appearance, because he hadn't been like, I'm looking for revenge. Like, he said nothing to the extent of that, but she was like, we'll help you get revenge, without even really knowing that that's what he was looking for.
Yeah, and kind of knowing where his story ends up, it's it's not surprising that he jumps on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely in line with the way he's thinking. But I have no idea where it came from. No clue where the girls got that from. It works in their favor.
It does.
Sort of. But what?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vex's persuasion roll was like 19 or something like that.
It was ridiculously high.
For convincing him to join their side. And I was like, it just moved so quickly. Like, how do you go from strangers to allies in the course of like, I think it was like 2 minutes.
Yeah. And he deliberately never uses the word friend. They try, they say it, but he deliberately never uses that. And in hindsight, that sticks out a lot more.
Yeah, he knows what he's about. He definitely knows what he's about.
There's no pretense there, at least not on his end.
Yeah. One thing that I found very interesting was the contrast between the group disagreeing very strongly with Vex and Keyleth. Like that argument went on longer than Clarota's conversation with them, when just a couple minutes later, they are able to convince a mind flayer to be their ally. And it's such a stark contrast because you would think that they would have an easier time convincing their group to go along with their plan. People who have been traveling with them for a while now, more so than a strange hostile creature that they just met. It's such a stark contrast.
Yeah. Oh, and it comes down to motives again. You know, I think everybody in the group is kind of blinded by the war camp that they've been dealing with. And kind of may have forgotten why they're there. Clarota, on the other hand, has nothing to worry about but whatever he's got going on.
Yeah, he's got a singular focus for sure. And it reminds me of the phrase, like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Like, I really think that that's what Clarota's thinking right now, but also like Vex and Keyleth are also thinking that right now because they got such a strong objection from their group, people who know them, like them, trust them. And then they go to like someone strange and hostile and they're like, yes, let's team up. And it's also really interesting to see like the gender dynamics at play here. Like that's one thing that really struck me is like, it's the two women arguing against the 5 men of the group and vice versa. And yet it's the women who return back to the group having persuaded a powerful ally to join their team.
I had not noticed that at all. And now
it's fast. This is like my whole
wow.
that I went down with this half of the episode because it makes me think of sociological dynamics where women tend to be more cooperative in groups, whereas men tends to be more competitive. And there are tons of neuroscientific and psychological studies that support this when it comes to humans, but we also see large evidence of this in primate groups as well. And it's also very apparent in the way that Keyleth's character is treated by the fandom throughout most of the campaign 1 as well. Like later on in the campaign, it becomes a running joke of how bad Keyleth's decisions can be sometimes. Thanks, Keyleth becomes like the sarcastic thanks, Keyleth becomes like a catchphrase, usually in reference to her spell choices mid-battle. And there has been a lot of discourse around this in the community with staunch pro-Keyleth and anti-Keyleth camps. Like it's a fence out there. And Marisha has spoken out a lot about these gender dynamics in the discourse on multiple occasions. But it's not until later with Vex too that we see her battle tactics and strategies that are being respected by the groups as well. Like there's a very famous scene occurring between her and Tiberius later on, which I'm not going to spoil it because it is a pivotal scene in the campaign. But I have always admired Matt's trailblazing when it comes to gender equality and respect as shown throughout the history of Critical Role. You can obviously see it here in his portrayal of Clarota and how he responds to Vex and Keyleth. Like Clarota, even though he's a male figure does not respond to Vex and Keyleth the same way as their own group does. And it's in stark contrast that the group argues with them, like these two ladies, versus how Clarota responds to them.
That is super interesting and not something I picked up on at all. But now that I'm thinking about it, it does kind of make sense, in that their priorities are kind of based around the way they view the world.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that does fall along gender lines.
Mm-hmm. Like, can you imagine what would have happened to Clarota if two of the men had gone down and found the hidden cavern?
We would never have had this episode, or what is it, 2 or 3 episodes that he's in? Yeah, no. I don't think he would have made it out of that pile of rags, given certain members' propensity for killing NPCs without actually talking to them first.
Yeah. Talk about shoot first, ask questions later.
Yeah, especially given, some of their experiences. It's part of why we're surprised that Vex and Keyleth make that connection. I don't think that any of the others would have taken the time. And I think if it had been even one of the women and a guy, we would have seen a very different outcome. Really, if anybody but these two had gone down, we wouldn't have Clarota.
Yeah. And Clarota is very powerful in his own right, even if he is dirty and afraid and disheveled. Like, I think he would have put up a hell of a fight against whoever challenged him. And we might have had some character deaths as a result, or at least some like very frantic, like everyone trying to get down to back up the rest of their group kind of dynamics.
Yeah, I think that would have been a very different story.
It would have been, for sure. So what kind of personal experiences are coming to mind with these themes?
I think the thing that I was reminded of throughout this episode was kind of the idea of going with it. Whatever is happening, you've got choices to make. And whatever choice you make, that's what you got to go with. You can't backtrack. There's no, oh, wait, I should have taken a left turn instead of a right. Like, maybe you'll get back there, but making the most of the choices that you make and taking the consequences and the benefits that come out of them in stride. And really going with your gut, taking that leap of faith, even if everybody disagrees with you, but it's the choice you want to make that choice and be proud of it. And for me, I think the biggest example is, I have a very strange career path. I was a chemist and then I became a librarian, which nobody does. And it's weird, and nobody thought that it was a good idea at all. Like, my guidance counselor told me we wouldn't know how to help you. Like, you would be on your own.
Well,
and I don't, right? Great thing to hear when you're sitting in your guidance counselor's office.
Yeah.
And it's a weird choice. I'm not sure I would do it again, but it's gotten me to some fantastic places, and it's taken me down a road that is unique and interesting. And there's been good, there's been bad. And that choice has really shaped the opportunities I've taken and the person that I am. So I think everybody saying, maybe not, and making that choice anyway, because it's what feels right, that really stood out to me as something that I could connect with from this episode.
Yeah, there was such sweet relish in the whole fuck it.
Yeah.
We're doing it anyway. I was like, yeah. Yeah, I loved that. I mean, for me, it reminds me of all the times that I've experienced both implicit and explicit sexism in terms of how my intelligence and strategies, resourcefulness, wow, that did not want to come out, capacities and abilities have been dismissed, diminished, disregarded by both men and women. Like patriarchy is seen on all sides. It affects and influences all genders. Like it's not just men and it's not just women who are affected by it. And my mom actually always made a point to not only include me in unladylike activities growing up, but actively encouraged it. Like she always encouraged me to be a very strong, independent woman. And one of my favorite memories is that she used to love, well, she still loves to renovate houses. And so we moved about every 5 or so years to a new house where she would restore it to a better state and then move on to the next one. And some of my favorite memories are of me and her ripping out carpeting and throwing it out of second-story windows. Like such glee when you're a kid. You're like, I can do that. I can throw carpet out windows. Cool. Or even like taking sledgehammers to both interior and exterior walls. But like she taught me the normal baking and sewing and crafting that is like women activities. But she also taught me how to like build things and fix things and like mow the lawn and like things that are traditionally considered to be men's tasks. And she's never been afraid of getting her hands dirty or offering her opinions or hauling around like heavy furniture and boxes. And we see a lot of that with Vex and Keyleth as well. Like, especially, I've been thinking a lot about Kith and Kin because I read it recently, and Vex's like ability to transform her skill sets and make sure that all of their needs are taken care of. And like, it becomes more of a partnership at that point, like her and Vax as they're growing up. And you see more of that as the campaign proceeds as well. Like she's used to playing a variety of roles to keep them safe, to keep them taken care of, to keep them, moving forward, whatever that looks like. And I can really relate to that.
I like that. I think that's a fun thing to have seen in this episode.
Mm-hmm. And Keyleth, she's in a leadership role and she's trying to figure out what that looks like too. And there's not as much gendered expectations too within the Ashari, because it's both women and men that can take the voice of the Tempest role.
Yeah. Keyleth is a really interesting character as we see her grow. And I love her for it because she is so complicated.
She's very complicated. Yeah. There's different times where I'm like, do I like her? Do I not like her? Like, I can never decide.
I think she tells an impressive story.
She does. It's engaging and you get sucked in whether you like it or not. Like all of the discourse that surrounds her, we're still talking about her to this day.
Yeah, and I gotta applaud Marisha for playing that character and sticking with it. Because especially in these early episodes where some of these decisions just don't make sense, she stuck with it because it was what the character needed. And in the long run, it benefited Keyleth tremendously. Mm-hmm. But it had to have been hard to sit through some of that right at the beginning for Marisha.
A lot of it is cringeworthy. Like the secondhand embarrassment is off the charts with me and Keyleth.
Sometimes I think that's very accurate.
So what actions are we being called to take with all of this?
I think for me, the biggest thing was listen first. Because they feed a lot of ideas to Clarota before he says anything. And in making assumptions, they shaped that situation in a way that may or may not benefit them in the long run. But it's all because they didn't take the time to let him speak for himself. So for me, I think I'm being called to assume as little as possible and listen more, and take the situation as it is and not as I want it to be.
Yeah, there was a very poignant moment right at the end of the episode where like Clarota's met the rest of the group, and then Vex goes, so are we in agreement that once we kill Kavarn, we will all be safe? And Clarota never answers because Scanlan cut in with his healing song.
Yeah.
And so they never got an agreement or a confirmation from Clarota that they would be safe as allies.
And that becomes huge. And that assumption is really going to cost them.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just being louder, prouder, more vocal in my feminism and fighting for gender equality, which is like something I already do. But like, I think it's important, on both sides or on all sides of the spectrum, like, especially with the rise of non-binary identification and the blending of masculine and feminine qualities. Like, I think we really need to understand how it affects all of us to varying degrees, and how we want to not only navigate it, but reform the system too. Like, it's an endemic.
Yeah. There's a long way to go with that.
Yeah. But we've also come a long way. Like,
yeah.
It was just 50 years ago that women were allowed to own bank accounts. 50 years.
We've done a lot in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And there's more to do.
Yeah. Like, my mom's 57. Like, she couldn't even own a bank account when she was born. Like, that just blows my mind. But yeah, we do still have work to do. And I think just talking about this stuff and being aware of it and actively working towards something, whether it's small progress or big progress, I think is the key. Yeah. Well, I mean, per usual, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about here. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. Always good to be here. So
any more Clarota soapboxes?
I'll save that for an episode when we've seen the rest of him.
Yeah. I mean, you just said 2 to 3 episodes of Clarota, and I didn't realize it was that short because it is so impactful. Like,
that's what I remember, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, he shapes the rest of the campaign easily.
Yeah. He really does. I'm looking it up because now I'm curious.
Yeah. When does Clarota disappear?
Let's see. No, I guess he's around for a total of 10 episodes. That's a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, that is long.
Wow.
We're going to be hanging out with Clarota for a long time.
Yeah. That is significantly longer than I thought. Now I'm feeling like I forgot something about him. But it makes sense why he shapes the campaign so heavily then.
Yeah, he does. I mean, this is the start of the era where NPCs make such a huge difference on the campaign, on the characters, on the plot lines. Like, NPCs are huge during campaign 1.
And he's the first of many that will shape everything to come after.
Yeah, goody. Yeah, so powerful themes. Audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts, feelings, insights, and stories with us as well. We'd love to hear how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives too. So special thanks to Alyssa for joining me again on this episode. It has been an absolute pleasure, per usual.
Always fun.
Yeah, so next time we will be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 4, Part 1. And joining me is going to be Petal again. She's going to be coming back, and I'm super excited to dive into it. So as always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests too, if you're interested. So come on, share your perspectives, share your insights, your stories, and please reach out to me via email if you're interested. or message me on Tumblr. I always hang out on there, and I'll send you the sign up form. And I can't wait to chat with you. So in the meantime, please comment, like, and subscribe below, and follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR for all of the juicy updates. And until next time, may all beings be free, may all beings be peaceful, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.
Bye.